The summer evening was perfect for stargazing. Tommy Walker sat in his backyard, legs crossed on the cool grass, head tilted back to admire the clear Montana sky. At 12 years old, he already knew more constellations than most adults, thanks to the astronomy books his father brought home from his travels. A soft breeze rustled through the pine trees surrounding their isolated home. The military housing complex where they lived sat far from the main base, offering privacy that Colonel James Walker valued after his years in Special Forces. Tonight, he was working late at the base, leaving Tommy with strict instructions to finish his homework and be in bed by 9. Tommy checked his watch, 8:45 p.m. He had 15 minutes before bedtime, just enough time to spot a few more stars. As he traced the outline of the Big Dipper with his finger, something unusual caught his eye. A faint blue light, much too low to be a star, pulsed gently above the tree line. "That's weird," Tommy muttered, standing up for a better look. The light grew bigger, brighter, moving in a way no aircraft should. His father had taught him to recognize every type of military and civilian aircraft, but this was different. The temperature dropped suddenly. The crickets went silent. Tommy's skin tingled with static electricity, making the hair on his arms stand up. He knew he should run inside, but curiosity kept him rooted to the spot. The blue light exploded into brilliance. A massive shape emerged from behind a cloud, metallic and smooth, with no visible engines or wings. It hovered silently, defying everything Tommy knew about physics. Before he could move, a beam of pale green light shot down from the craft. Tommy tried to run, but his legs wouldn't respond. He opened his mouth to shout, but no sound came out. The last thing he saw was his own shadow stretching across the grass as he floated upward into the unknown. Colonel James Walker knew something was wrong the moment he pulled into his driveway. The house was dark, and Tommy always left the porch light on for him. He killed the engine, and years of combat experience took over. His hand moved instinctively to the sidearm he always carried. The backyard gate stood open. Tommy's astronomy book lay face down in the grass, its pages fluttering in the wind. Next to it, a perfect circle of scorched earth marked the ground. "Tommy," James called out, sweeping the yard with his tactical flashlight. "Tommy, answer me." The security cameras. James rushed to his home office, bringing up the footage on his computer. The backyard camera showed Tommy stargazing, then the strange light, and finally, James froze the frame. The image was blurry but unmistakable, a craft of impossible design, hovering over his son. His phone rang. Base security. "Colonel Walker," a tense voice said, "we've detected an unauthorized energy signature over your sector. Our radar picked up something big, but it's like nothing we've ever seen." James stared at the scorch marks in his yard, at the strange metallic residue that seemed to shimmer even in darkness. His mind raced through his years of classified operations, the whispered stories, the unexplained phenomena that got buried in redacted files. "Lock down the base," he ordered, his voice deadly calm. "Contact the Joint Chiefs. Authorization code Walker 77 Alpha. Tell them." He paused, looking at the empty sky where his son had vanished. "Tell them we have a confirmed first contact situation, and tell them they've taken my son." As military vehicles began converging on his house and helicopters thundered overhead, Colonel James Walker made two silent promises. First, he would find his son, no matter how far into space he had to go. And second, the aliens who took Tommy would learn a harsh lesson about humanity. Never take a soldier's child. Never underestimate a father's fury. And never, ever assume that a pre-space flight civilization is harmless. Deep within the massive research vessel Starseeker, lead researcher Gray studied the latest specimen through a transparent barrier. The human child sat calmly on the examination table, showing none of the panic typical of newly captured subjects. This bothered Gray immensely. "Subject appears unusually composed," Gray spoke into his recorder, "most peculiar for a primitive species. His large eyes blinked slowly as he made notes on his floating screen. Tommy Walker watched the alien watching him. The creature was tall and thin, with gray skin that seemed to shimmer like fish scales. His father's voice echoed in his head. If you're ever captured, observe everything. Knowledge is power. The holding cell was a simple white room with smooth walls. Tommy had already counted the steps across it. 15. Noted the location of air vents. 2, both too small to climb through. And spotted the barely visible door seam. Left wall. No obvious handle. Why have you chosen not to scream? Gray asked through the translation device. All other specimens display fear upon waking. Tommy shrugged. Screaming wastes energy. Dad taught me that. Gray turned to his assistant, Blue. This response is unexpected. The species profile indicated humans would be easy subjects. Limited space travel, no unified global government, primitive weapons. We followed protocol. Blue defended. Selected an isolated subject from a low population area. No signs of technological advancement in the dwelling. Tommy almost smiled. These aliens had no idea they'd grabbed a Special Forces colonel's son, trained since birth to handle extreme situations. They didn't know about the tactical exercises disguised as games, the survival training masked as camping trips, or the military protocols drilled into him through bedtime stories. Begin the standard tests, Gray ordered. A panel opened in the ceiling. A robot arm descended, holding what looked like a simple puzzle box. Tommy recognized the test type immediately. His father had shown him similar intelligence assessments used by the military. Solve the puzzle, young human, Gray instructed. Take as much time as. Tommy's hands moved quickly, fingers finding pressure points and hidden switches. The puzzle box clicked, whirred, and opened in under 30 seconds. Silence filled the room. Gray's assistant dropped his datapad. Impossible, Gray whispered. That's the level 3 test. We haven't even started with level 1. Tommy set the box down carefully. Can I try another one? Over the next hour, Tommy solved increasingly complex puzzles, each time beating the previous species records. He could see the aliens growing more agitated, conferring in hushed tones, and reviewing their data repeatedly. This is wrong, Blue finally said. Check the species database again. These results cannot come from a pre-FTL civilization. Gray pulled up a holographic display. Earth, third planet from a standard yellow star. No official contact with galactic community. Military capability. Minimal. Space exploration. Limited to their own moon. This should have been a routine collection. Tommy watched them argue, memorizing every detail of their technology. The holograms, the door mechanisms, the translation devices, his father would want to know everything. We should call Central Command, Blue suggested. These results are unprecedented. No, Gray snapped. This is my research mission. We'll continue the tests. One unusual specimen doesn't change anything. As the aliens argued, Tommy noticed something interesting. Each time they activated their holographic displays, the force field around his cell flickered slightly. A weakness in their power system, maybe. He filed that information away for later. The next test involves basic survival scenarios, Gray announced, trying to sound confident. We'll see how the human handles stress. Tommy straightened his shoulders, just like his father taught him. I'm ready. But Gray was wrong. This wasn't just a test for Tommy. It was humanity's first step into a larger universe. And soon, these aliens would learn that they hadn't captured a helpless child. They had captured the spark that would ignite humanity's fury across the stars. The Pentagon's secret underground war room buzzed with activity. Screens covered every wall, showing satellite data, radar readings, and incoming video calls from military leaders around the world. In the center of it all stood Colonel James Walker, his face hard as stone as he addressed the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The energy signature matches nothing in our databases, he said, pointing to a glowing graph. But we've seen something similar before. He pulled out a classified file marked Top Secret, Roswell Incident. General Roberts, the highest-ranking officer present, leaned forward. "You're saying there's a connection?" "Not just Roswell," James replied. "Area 51, the Russian Tunguska event, the Brazilian UFO crash. They all left the same energy trace we detected in my backyard." The room fell silent. For decades, the world's governments had kept these incidents hidden. Now, with a child taken, everything would have to come out. Suddenly, a new face appeared on the main screen. Director Li of China's space program. "Colonel Walker," she said, "we've been tracking the alien vessel. It passed our lunar base an hour ago." More screens lit up. India's defense minister, Russia's space commander, and the European Space Agency's chief all joined the call. Each had a piece of the puzzle. "We have something to show you," the Russian commander said. His image was replaced by footage of a massive hidden facility. "This is what we built from the UFO that crashed in Siberia. We think it's an engine, possibly faster than light." James watched as other nations revealed their secret projects. China had alien navigation systems. India had developed shields from crashed UFO parts. Europe had weapons that could pierce any known material. "For years, we've kept these discoveries to ourselves," General Roberts said. "But now," he looked at the photo of Tommy on the main screen, "now we work together." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Scientists from every major nation flew to secret facilities. Military leaders shared classified files. Engineers began combining their hidden technologies. In an underground hangar in Nevada, James walked alongside Dr. Anna West, Earth's leading expert on alien technology. Before them stood a half-finished spacecraft, its hull gleaming under bright lights. "We've been building this prototype for years," Anna explained. "With the new shared technology, we can finish it in days." She touched the ship's smooth surface. "It's not just an engine or a weapon. It's everything we've learned about their technology, combined into one vessel." "How fast can it go?" James asked. "With the Russian drive and Chinese navigation." Anna smiled. "Fast enough to catch them." Back in the war room, General Roberts made the call that would change history. "By joint agreement of all major world powers, I am authorizing Project Thunderchild. Colonel Walker will lead an international strike team to recover our citizen and show these aliens that humanity is not to be underestimated." Across the globe, things began moving at incredible speed. Special Forces operators from a dozen nations converged on the Nevada facility. Scientists worked around the clock, combining technologies that had been kept secret for generations. In his temporary quarters, James studied the star maps created from the alien vessel's energy trail. A knock at his door made him look up. A group of the world's top Special Forces soldiers stood there. British SAS, Russian Spetsnaz, Israeli commandos, and more. "Your son's one of ours now, Colonel," the British captain said. "We're all parents too. We're ready when you are." James nodded, feeling the weight of what was coming. Humanity had kept itself divided, hiding its discoveries and advances out of fear and mistrust. Now, in responding to this threat, Earth's nations had finally united. The aliens thought they had taken a helpless child from a primitive world. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant, a world that had been preparing for this moment for decades, whether it knew it or not. And in doing so, they had triggered something unprecedented: the full, united fury of planet Earth. Project Thunderchild's prototype ship cut through space like a blade. Its dark hull, built from combined alien technologies, absorbed light rather than reflected it. In the command center, Colonel James Walker studied the star map as his international crew worked their stations. "Energy trace is still strong," reported Captain Mike Jones, their British sensor expert. "They're heading toward the Orion Arm." The ship's interior looked more like a military command center than the sleek sci-fi designs everyone had expected. Practical screens, sturdy equipment, and weapon racks lined the walls. Each crew member wore their nation's military uniform, with a new patch on their shoulder, a simple image of Earth with stars behind it. "Contact ahead," called out Lieutenant Emma Reed from the forward scanner. "It's not our target, but it's definitely artificial." On the main screen, a small ship appeared. It looked damaged, drifting in space like a wounded animal. "Life signs?" James asked. "Two," Emma replied. "And they're sending out a distress signal." James made a quick decision. "Bring us alongside. This might be our first chance at information." The rescue operation took less than an hour. The ship's crew, two alien merchants who looked nothing like Tommy's abductors, were shocked to see humans this far from Earth. "Collectors," the first merchant said through the translation device, spitting the word like it was poison. "They took your young one. They take from many worlds." James leaned forward. "Tell me everything you know." The merchants shared their knowledge. The collectors were a species obsessed with studying others. They maintained massive research stations throughout the galaxy, each one filled with specimens from hundreds of worlds. "They believe it is their right," the second merchant explained. "To them, less advanced species are just test subjects." "How many stations do they have?" James asked. "6 that we know of. But the one you seek." The merchant pulled up a star chart. "It is here. The primary research station. All new specimens go there first." As the crew uploaded the merchant's data, James studied their new guests. These aliens showed no fear of humans, just sympathy and a shared anger toward the collectors. "You're not surprised to see us out here," James noted. The first merchant made a sound like quiet laughter. "Your species' reputation spreads. News travels fast when a primitive world builds a starship in days and launches a rescue mission. Many are watching." After resupplying the merchant's ship, Thunderchild continued its hunt. The crew worked in shifts, pushing the engines to their limits. Every hour brought them closer to Tommy. In his private quarters, James reviewed the data. The primary research station was massive, an artificial world built for their twisted science. Breaking in wouldn't be easy. A knock at his door revealed Commander Yuki Tanaka, their Japanese weapons expert. "Colonel, you should see this." In the ship's observation room, the crew had gathered around a long-range scanner. As they watched, more ships appeared on the screen. Vessels of different designs and sizes, all heading in the same direction as Thunderchild. "They're like us," Emma said softly. "Other species going to rescue their people." James watched the ships on the screen. Some were clearly warships, others looked like modified civilian vessels. All of them had the same purpose, to take back what the collectors had stolen. "Send out a contact signal," he ordered. "Let's talk to our new friends." As Thunderchild moved to join the growing fleet, James felt a fierce pride. Humanity's first major act in galactic society wasn't trade or diplomacy. It was leading a rescue mission. And soon, the collectors would learn that they hadn't just angered Earth. They had started a revolution among their victims. Tommy Walker sat in his cell, watching the small light above the door flicker each time the force field cycled. After 2 weeks of tests, he had learned more about the collectors' technology than they had learned about him. Now it was time to put that knowledge to use. "Hey," he called out to the alien in the cell across from his. The creature looked like a blue deer with 4 eyes. "Watch the light. 3 flickers, then a pause. That's their power cycle." The alien, who called himself Swift, moved closer to his cell barrier. "You think we can use this?" Tommy nodded. "Remember those exercise periods they give us? I've been counting steps, monitoring guard rotations. There's a pattern to everything they do." In the cell next to Swift, a creature that looked like a furry snake raised its head. "They're scientists," it hissed softly. "They love patterns." Over the past week, Tommy had been teaching other captives what his father had taught him about military tactics. The collectors had made a big mistake, putting all their specimens in cells where they could see and talk to each other. "Roll call," Tommy whispered. One by one, Voices answered from different cells. There were 12 of them in this section, all younger members of their species. The collectors kept the children separate from adult specimens, thinking they would be easier to control. Another mistake. "Today's the day," Tommy said. "Remember the plan. When they come for the morning tests, everyone needs to act extra scared. Make them think we're breaking down." The others agreed. They had practiced this, learning to make their vital signs spike in ways that would worry the researchers. Right on schedule, lead researcher Gray appeared with his assistants. They'd moved from cell to cell, checking readings on their floating screens. "Subject stress levels are unusually high," Gray noted, sounding pleased. "The isolation must be affecting them as theorized." Tommy huddled in the corner of his cell, shaking. It wasn't hard to fake fear. He just thought about how worried his dad must be. The act worked. Gray spent less time checking Tommy's cell, assuming the primitive human had finally broken. As soon as the researchers left, Tommy sprang into action. "Swift, start the distraction in 10 minutes. Remember, make it big." While waiting, Tommy pulled out the small device he had built from parts stolen during tests. The collectors thought humans couldn't understand their technology. They didn't know Tommy had been taking things apart and rebuilding them since he was 5. Right on time, Swift began screaming. The sound was horrible, exactly what the researchers expected from a broken specimen. Guards rushed to his cell. Tommy counted down as the force field cycled. 1 flicker, 2, 3. In the split second of weakness, he pressed his device against the barrier. There was a small spark, and the field collapsed. Alarms began blaring, but Tommy was ready. He rushed to the control panel by Swift's cell, using his device to short out more force fields. One by one, the specimens were freed. "Remember the plan," Tommy shouted as chaos erupted. "Smaller ones, stay in the middle. Bigger ones, protect the group, just like we practiced." The escaped specimens moved as a unit, just as Tommy had taught them. They used the tactics he had learned from his father's training: stick together, use cover, create distractions. As they ran through the corridors, more specimens joined them. Word had spread through the station's ventilation systems about the human child who was teaching others to fight back. In the control room, Gray watched in horror as his perfectly ordered research station descended into chaos. "How?" he demanded. "They're just children." But he was wrong. They weren't just children anymore. Under Tommy's guidance, they had become a resistance force. And as alarms blared throughout the station, Tommy led his growing army toward the communication center. "Time to call for help," he told his followers with a grin. "And I know exactly how to contact Earth." The revolution had begun, and it was being led by the one thing the collectors had underestimated most: a human child who refused to be a victim. The primary research station loomed before them, a massive ring-shaped structure floating in space. Project Thunderchild led a fleet of over 30 ships from different alien worlds, all united in their mission to free the captured specimens. Colonel James Walker stood on the bridge, fully armed in his combat gear. "All ships report ready," Captain Jones announced. "They're following your lead, sir." Suddenly, the main screen lit up with an incoming transmission. James's heart stopped when he saw the face on the screen. "Dad." Tommy's grin was fierce and proud. "I knew you'd come." "Tommy, are you okay? Where are you?" "In the main control room," Tommy replied. "I've got friends with me. We've taken over part of the station, but we need help. I'm sending you the station's blueprints now." The crew stared in amazement as detailed maps of the facility appeared on their screens. James couldn't help but smile. His son hadn't just survived. He turned the tables on his captors. "That's my boy," James said softly. Then, to the fleet, "All ships, prepare for assault. We have allies inside." The attack began with perfect timing. While the collector's security forces rushed to deal with Tommy's internal uprising, the rescue fleet struck from outside. Thunderchild's weapons, built from combined Earth technologies, cut through the station's outer defenses like they were paper. Inside the station, Tommy led his group of escaped specimens through the corridors. They had armed themselves with stolen research tools, turning scientific equipment into weapons. The furry snake-like creature slithered ahead as a scout, while Swift and others protected the smaller specimens. "The docking bay is ahead," Tommy called out. "My dad's coming in through there. We need to help them land." Lead researcher Gray's voice boomed over the station speakers. "This is impossible. You're just test subjects. You can't do this. You should have studied Earth's history," Tommy replied through a stolen communicator. "Humans don't like being called test subjects." In space, the battle was turning into a rout. The collectors had never prepared for a coordinated attack. Their research station had good defenses, but they were designed to keep specimens in, not armies out. James led the first boarding party, blasting through the docking bay doors with Earth's special forces and alien allies right behind him. The collectors' security forces found themselves facing fighters from a dozen different worlds, all using tactics they'd never seen before. "Primitive weapons," a collector guard sneered, activating his energy shield. James raised his simple metal rifle and fired. The bullet, made from metals recovered from crashed UFOs, went straight through the alien shield. "Not so primitive anymore," he said as the guard fell. The two groups, Tommy's resistance and James's rescue team, met in a large laboratory chamber. Father and son ran to each other, sharing a quick hug before turning to face the remaining collector forces surrounding them. "Permission to help with the rescue, sir?" Tommy asked formally, making James laugh despite the situation. "Permission granted, soldier." Together, they coordinated their forces. The escaped specimens knew the station's layout, while the rescue team had the weapons and training to secure it. The collectors found themselves being systematically pushed back by the very creatures they had thought were inferior. In his hidden command center, lead researcher Gray watched his life's work fall apart. "Stop," he shouted over the speakers. "You're ruining years of vital research." James grabbed the nearest communication panel. "Your research days are over. Earth is claiming this station by right of conquest. Any collectors who surrender will be treated according to human laws. Anyone who resists." He looked at the multi-species army around him. "Well, you have a lot of angry parents to deal with." The station's corridors echoed with the sound of dropping weapons as the last collectors gave up. Victory wasn't just about superior firepower. It was about the unbeatable combination of human determination and a father's love for his son. 1 month after the battle, the primary research station had been transformed. Earth's flags flew alongside banners from 24 alien worlds. The former prison cells now served as temporary homes for rescued specimens waiting to return to their families. Tommy Walker stood with his father in the main observation deck, watching ships come and go. Each day, more families arrived to reclaim their loved ones. The reunions always made Tommy smile. "The Galactic Council is ready for us," Colonel James Walker said, straightening his uniform. "Ready to make history." Tommy nodded. Today, Earth would officially join the galactic community. Not as a primitive world to be studied, but as a force to be respected. The council chamber was huge, with seats for representatives from hundreds of worlds. The collectors who had run the station sat in a special area, under heavy guard. Lead researcher Gray looked much smaller now, without his floating screens and army of assistants. The council leader, a tall being made of shifting crystal patterns, spoke first. "We are here to address the incident at Research Station 1, and to welcome Earth to the galactic community." The crystal being turned toward Gray. "The collector's actions have violated our most sacred laws." Gray stood, his voice shaking. "We were advancing science. These primitives built a spacecraft in days," interrupted a council member. "They united their entire world to save one child. They led a fleet of many species to victory." Tommy stepped forward. "And we made friends with everyone you tried to study. While you were testing us, we were learning about each other, making connections, becoming stronger together." The council leader nodded approvingly. "Young human speaks wisdom. Connection is stronger than control." They turned to Colonel Walker. "Earth has proved itself many times over. What do you ask of the council?" James placed a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "3 things. First, the collectors must free all their research subjects and close their stations." "Granted," the council leader said immediately. "And your second request?" "Earth will serve as a sanctuary world. Any species facing unauthorized collection or study can seek refuge with us. We'll protect them." Murmurs of approval filled the chamber. Even some council members nodded in respect. "And your third request?" James smiled. "That's actually Tommy's request." Tommy stepped forward again. "I want to start a school. Not for studying people, but for learning from each other. All the species I met in the station. We're different, but we can help each other grow stronger." The crystal being's patterns shifted to bright colors of approval. "Granted, granted, and granted. The former research station will become Earth's embassy and interspecies learning center." They turned to the gathered aliens. "Let all worlds know, Earth joins us not as a primitive world, but as a protector of the weak and a teacher of unity." Later, back on the station, Tommy watched as workers replaced the old collector symbols with the new Earth Embassy logo. A hand reaching out to the stars. "Did we do good, Dad?" he asked. "We did great, son." James looked at the stars beyond the station. "You know, they thought they were choosing an easy target. Instead, they gave humanity exactly what we needed. A reason to unite, a way to reach the stars, and a chance to show who we really are." Swift appeared in the doorway, now wearing an Earth Embassy badge. Like many of the rescued specimens, he had chosen to stay and help with Tommy's school. "First students arrive tomorrow," he announced excitedly. Tommy grinned. "Then we better get ready. We've got a lot to teach them about humanity." As father and son walked through their new home, ships from dozens of worlds docked at the station. Each one carried students, diplomats, or families eager to learn from the species that had changed the galaxy, not through conquest or technology, but through compassion, courage, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The collectors had wanted to study humanity. Instead, they had revealed humanity's greatest strengths to the entire galaxy. And it all started because they chose the wrong kid.